Cassian Rowe had everything: private jets, boardroom power, and a last name that made investors say yes before he spoke. But on one cold morning, when his foot struck what he thought was trash, the voice that came from the cardboard box changed not just his day, but the rest of his life. Cassian Rowe didn't normally walk anywhere. Not because he was arrogant, but because being the youngest billionaire in San Francisco came with a bubble of armored cars, assistants, and high-end solitude. But this morning was different. He'd fired his driver mid-argument and told his staff not to follow him. He wanted silence, fresh air, a reminder that he was still human beneath the layers of business, wealth, and branding. The morning streets were damp with fog, and he walked aimlessly through an older industrial district far from his usual route. There were no designer boutiques here, no glossy office towers or valet parking, just cracked sidewalks, rusting mailboxes, and the distant echo of a barking dog. Cassian's shoes kicked through bits of trash, an empty soda can, a torn plastic bag, some fast food wrappers. He was lost in thought, replaying a bitter phone call with the board, when he saw a battered cardboard box leaning against a trash bin. He kicked it, not hard, just a casual nudge with the tip of his leather shoe. But then something stopped him cold. A sound, a tiny voice, muffled and shaky. "Please don't." Cassian staggered back. He stared at the box, heart suddenly thudding in his chest. The box, it moved. He dropped to a crouch and carefully peeled back a flap. Inside was a little girl. She was curled up in a fetal position, barefoot, wearing a stained pink dress with holes at the seams. Her arms wrapped around a filthy teddy bear that looked like it had been stitched and restitched a dozen times. Her cheeks were smudged with dirt, and her hair was tangled in thick knots. She looked no older than 5. Her eyes met his, bright green and far too aware for someone her age. Cassian's voice cracked. What are you doing in there?" She didn't answer. She just stared at him with quiet terror, then whispered again, "Are you going to take me too?" He blinked, stunned. "What? No. Who put you here? Where are your parents?" The girl said nothing. Cassian glanced around. There were no adults, no footsteps, no signs that anyone had been near. The alley was still, silent. He stood, yanked off his coat, and wrapped it around the girl, who didn't resist. He lifted her carefully, feeling just how light and fragile she was. She didn't even cry. A minute later, he stepped out onto the nearest street and flagged a cab, ignoring the confused look on the driver's face. "Closest hospital," Cassian said firmly, holding the girl close. "Drive now." As the cab pulled away, he looked down at her again. She had fallen asleep against his chest. But even asleep, her tiny fingers clutched the teddy bear like it was her last anchor to the world. The emergency room was quiet for once. Cassian rushed through the automatic doors with the girl still wrapped tightly in his coat. The triage nurse at the front desk didn't recognize him at first. His hair was disheveled and his face strained. Nothing like the polished billionaire that graced magazine covers. But her eyes widened when she saw the child in his arms. "Child found alone," he said quickly. "She was in a cardboard box on 19th and Howard. I think she's hurt, starving, cold." The nurse immediately called a code, and within seconds a pediatric team appeared. A young doctor gently took the girl from Cassian's arms, laying her down on a stretcher with practiced urgency. The girl whimpered as her hand slipped from Cassian's coat, but she didn't resist. Cassian tried to follow them, but a nurse stopped him. "Sir, you need to wait here." "I'm not leaving her," he said firmly, his voice hard. "She was alone. No one else came. She clung to me. Let me stay." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but stay back. Let them work." From behind the glass, Cassian watched them examine her. He saw the way the doctor's face hardened at the bruises on her arms. He saw the nurse grimace when they found sores on her feet. But she was alive, breathing. After what felt like hours, the lead pediatrician came into the hallway, removing her gloves. She looked tired but kind. "She's stable," she said. "Dehydrated, malnourished, light bruising, but no internal injuries, no signs of recent abuse, but definitely signs of long-term neglect. She hasn't been properly cared for in a long time. Cassian ran a hand through his hair, his stomach sinking. Does she have a name? She hasn't said anything else yet, the doctor replied. But we've contacted Child Protective Services. They'll send someone down shortly. He nodded slowly, but the pit in his stomach only grew. She said something before I brought her in. She asked if I was going to take her too. The doctor frowned. What do you think she meant by that? I don't know, he said quietly, but it didn't sound good. An hour later, a woman in her mid-40s entered the waiting area with a badge clipped to her jacket. Her presence was calm, but no nonsense. She introduced herself as Meredith Langley, a senior social worker with CPS. I heard what you did. Thank you for stepping in, she said, shaking his hand. But now we take it from here. Cassian's jaw tightened. She begged me not to let anyone take her. Screamed, like she'd been through it before. Meredith sighed. Unfortunately, some children go through many placements. It can be traumatic, but this is our process. He followed her into the observation room. The girl, still silent, was curled in a hospital bed with a blanket over her. Her eyes snapped open the moment the door clicked. She saw Meredith and instantly shrank against the wall, trembling. No, she whispered. No, 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 don't let her take me. Don't let them take me again. Cassian stepped forward. It's okay. I'm here. She launched herself off the bed and ran straight into his arms. Her little hands clung to his shirt with the strength of desperation. Meredith watched in silence. Cassian held her tight. You're safe now. I promise. The girl buried her face in his chest and whispered so softly he almost missed it. They hurt the others. Don't let them take me too. Meredith's expression shifted, something between concern and dread. She slowly stepped forward. What others, sweetheart? The girl didn't answer. But the room suddenly felt colder, heavier. Cassian looked at Meredith. You're going to investigate that, right? Meredith nodded slowly. Oh, yes, we will. And just like that, what began as a morning walk had spiraled into something darker, something much bigger. Cassian didn't know what he'd stepped into, but something told him he was already in too deep to turn back. They gave the girl a name for the paperwork. Jane Doe. But Cassian wasn't having it. She deserved a real name. When she finally spoke again, days later, it came in the form of a whisper while she stared at the ceiling of the private hospital suite Cassian had arranged. Lily, she said. He leaned closer, setting down the book he'd been trying to read her. Is that your name? She nodded faintly. Lily what? She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the door. Her little voice trembled. May, maybe. I think it's Lily May. Cassian repeated it softly as if to reassure her it was safe now. Lily May. She nodded again and wrapped herself tighter in the blanket. Meredith Langley had allowed Lily to remain under Cassian's temporary care due to her unusual response to him, though the arrangement was highly irregular. But Meredith had her own suspicions. There were signs, not just neglect, trauma. She started digging through missing child cases from the past 5 years and brought in a forensic interviewer to speak gently with Lily, piecing together her fragmented memories. The sessions were painful to witness. Lily mentioned a place with lots of rooms and blinking lights. She described a mean man with a scratchy voice who took her away from a big lady who cried a lot. Cassian sat in the hallway outside the room, gripping his knees, listening through the door. Did the big lady have your eyes? The therapist asked. Lily shrugged. I don't know. I don't remember her face, but she smelled like lemon soap. One day she spoke about the van. They made us sit real still, Lily said, and no talking. And when the box is closed, you got to be quiet or the man gets mad. How many kids? The therapist asked gently. 5, Lily said. Then her voice dropped to a near whisper. But I don't know where the other ones went. That night, Cassian didn't sleep. He stood by the window of the hotel suite he had rented entirely for Lily's comfort and safety. The city lights shimmered beneath him, but all he saw was that box, her small hand reaching out, her voice trembling. He called his head of security, Sasha Verno. I need discreet surveillance equipment. I want to track vans, warehouses. Cross-reference anything that matches what she said. I don't care if it's borderline legal. Use my satellites if you have to. You're serious? Sasha asked. Cassian's voice was steady. I've never been more serious. Within 48 hours, Cassian's tech empire quietly pivoted its vast resources. His rideshare company owned massive location data infrastructure, servers, image recognition algorithms, and satellite contracts. Now all of it focused on one goal: identifying warehouses within a 30-mile radius that matched Lily's broken descriptions. Meanwhile, he never left her side. He read her books, played music, watched her slowly eat real food again, and each time she reached out to touch his hand, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't charity, it wasn't guilt. It was something else, something deeper. Something that told him he wasn't going to stop until he knew the truth. 3 days later, Cassian stood in front of a massive digital wall inside one of his tech company's secret R&D labs. The lights were low, monitors glowing with satellite images, heat maps, and warehouse schematics. Sasha Verno stood beside him, a coffee cup in hand and eyes sharp with purpose. We've narrowed it down to 3 sites, she said. All private properties, all warehouses with minimal traffic and blacked out records. No listed business activity. But this one, she pointed to a concrete structure in an industrial zone just outside Fremont, has power spikes every other night, no delivery manifests, and a perimeter of wired fencing with tamper alerts. Cassian stared at the image. His hands tightened behind his back. Get someone inside. Sasha raised an eyebrow. You want me to break and enter a potential trafficking hub? Cass, you're already skating thin ice with this kind of operation. If we tip off the wrong people, don't care. We're not calling the police until we know what's really going on. I don't trust them not to screw it up. After a long pause, Sasha gave a small nod. Then I'm calling Smoke. Smoke, real name Joaquin Mendoza, was a shadow from Cassian's college days. An ex-black ops specialist turned private ghost. He owed Cassian a favor after a quiet investment helped him rebuild his life. And now, that debt was being called in. That night, Cassian barely spoke to Lily. He sat beside her in the suite while she drifted to sleep, holding her teddy bear like it held the last thread of her soul. He stroked her hair and whispered, I'm going to find them, Lily. The others. I promise. At 3:12 a.m., Cassian's encrypted line buzzed. He answered immediately. Smoke's voice came in calm and cold. I've got eyes inside. Cassian's heart pounded. What do you see? 3 kids. Young, sedated, 2 male, 1 female. Back room. They're prepping for something. I heard the word shipment on a radio. Someone said, last round went smooth. And Cass... What? There are boxes, lined up in a van, like the one you described. One of them was moving. Cassian's body went cold. I'm sending you the footage, Smoke said. Timestamp it, save it, but we've got to move fast before they relocate. I give it 48 hours, tops. Cassian hung up and stared at the video as it loaded. Grainy, dark, but clear enough. A child's hand, limp, slid from the edge of a taped cardboard box. The rage that built in him was like nothing he had ever known. He forwarded the entire file to Meredith Langley with only a single message. This is real. You have to act. He didn't wait for her response. Instead, he called his legal team and a private child rights advocacy group he'd quietly funded years ago. He wanted media pressure. He wanted warrants. He wanted judges out of bed and news anchors preparing the morning's top story. By dawn, the wheels were turning. And by the time Lily opened her eyes and whispered, Is it morning yet? Cassian knelt by her side, voice shaking. It is, and something good is coming today. She blinked slowly, her eyes still foggy from sleep. Did you find them? He kissed her forehead. We're about to. At 6:04 a.m., federal agents surrounded the warehouse. It wasn't a loud operation. No sirens, no shouting, just swift, surgical precision. Meredith Langley had taken Cassian's evidence straight to a contact in the Justice Department who specialized in child trafficking cases. By the time the sun rose, a full task force had been authorized to act. Cassian watched everything unfold from the war room in his corporate tower. Screens lit up with drone footage, radio chatter, and thermal scans. Sasha stood beside him, arms crossed tightly, her jaw clenched. Smoke had stayed on site, feeding real-time updates through a secure headset. Cassian didn't blink. His whole body was wound so tight it felt like his skin might snap. "They're going in," Sasha said softly. On screen, armed agents breached the rear loading dock of the building. Within minutes, a team poured inside. They moved with the fluidity of seasoned professionals, clearing rooms and subduing the handful of guards they encountered. Cassian gripped the edge of the console as one camera panned into the main chamber and froze. Boxes, lined up, labeled with initials, some sealed, some open. And near the back wall, 3 children sat on the floor, dazed, barely conscious. One of them, a boy no older than 7, looked directly at the camera and blinked. It was real, all of it. "Suspects in custody," came a voice over the speakers. "Children secured. We need EMS. Repeat. Urgent medical response needed. Malnutrition and signs of sedation." Cassian exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Then came the words that broke him. "There's a 4th child. We just found her, in a box. Barely responsive, but breathing." He turned away from the screen, hands covering his face, emotions rushing forward all at once. Rage, relief, grief. He wanted to scream. He wanted to tear the entire building down. But most of all, he wanted to hug Lily and tell her she was right. By mid-morning, national news had broken the story. Billionaire's evidence leads to rescue of children from underground medical trafficking ring. The details were disturbing. The warehouse had been run by a shell corporation that claimed to do clinical research on synthetic immune boosters. In reality, they were exploiting undocumented children, orphans, and runaways, using them as human subjects in unapproved pharmaceutical trials. One name stood out in the report: Carl Jennings. Cassian froze when he heard it. Lily had called him Uncle Carl. He was a former biochemist with a history of ethical violations, stripped of his medical license 10 years ago, and had vanished off the grid until now. That afternoon, he was arrested while trying to board a private boat near Monterey under a fake identity. Federal agents stormed the dock, guns drawn. Carl was caught with suitcases full of burner phones, syringes, and $500,000 in cash. Back in the hospital suite, Lily sat on the bed watching the news with a nurse nearby. She pointed to the screen as Carl's face appeared in handcuffs. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the bad man." Cassian walked in a moment later, breath catching as he saw her alert, engaged. For the first time, she didn't look like a ghost of a child. She looked alive. "He's gone, Lily," he said gently. "He can't hurt you, or anyone else." Lily looked up at him, her voice small but steady. "You found the others?" Cassian nodded, kneeling by her side. "We did." Tears welled in her eyes. "Do they have mommies and daddies?" "Some do, some don't, but they're safe now, like you." She reached out, took his hand and whispered, "Can you be my daddy? Just pretend." Cassian felt his chest twist. He leaned forward and touched his forehead to hers. "I'm not pretending," he said. "Not now, not ever." The aftermath was a whirlwind of media, legal filings, and public outrage. Cassian's name was everywhere, splashed across headlines, debated on talk shows, hailed as a hero by some and questioned by others. But none of it mattered to him. His world had narrowed to one small, green-eyed girl with tangled hair and a slowly healing heart. Lily had started smiling more, laughing sometimes. Her voice was no longer a whisper. She drew pictures and lined them across the suite's window like stained glass. Stick figures of Cass and Lily, holding hands beneath a sun with too many rays. She began to eat full meals, play music on a tiny keyboard Cassian had bought her, and once, while watching cartoons, she fell asleep against his side, teddy bear clutched in one hand, his fingers in the other. Still there were hurdles. Meredith Langley returned weeks later, this time with a folder in her hands and a more formal expression. She watched Cassian playing chess with Lily at the breakfast table and waited until Lily ran off to feed a plush giraffe its imaginary lunch. "We need to talk," Meredith said. Cassian stood, brushing off his jeans. "Is this about custody?" "It's about reality," she replied. "You've been Lily's temporary guardian under emergency circumstances. But formal adoption, permanent legal custody, that's another process." "I know," he said calmly. "I've already hired the top family law team in the state." "That's not enough," she said, sitting down. "You're a single man, unmarried, no parental experience, no homesteading built for children. This is uncharted territory for CPS. We don't just place traumatized kids with billionaires because they mean well." Cassian crossed his arms. "I don't mean well. I've been here every hour, every therapy session. I've changed her routine, restructured my life, and created a team around her care. I didn't just throw money at the problem, Meredith. I gave her a life." Meredith looked at him, genuinely softening for the first time. "You did," she admitted. "And you may very well be the only person in the last year she's trusted. But family court judges want more than feelings. They want a stable environment, a long-term plan, a home, not a hotel suite, consistency." Cassian didn't respond. He simply opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "My long-term plan," he said. Inside was a deed. A house, recently purchased in Lily's name. A 3-bedroom Victorian with a yard and security upgrades. The second document listed Cassian as the founder of a new trauma recovery foundation, offering therapy and housing for rescued children, staffed by child psychologists, pediatric nurses, and former foster care alumni. "Lily's already enrolled at a nearby school. I hired a private tutor to transition her when she's ready, and I started taking parenting classes, twice a week. No cameras, no press." Meredith blinked. "You're serious?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "This isn't a moment. It's my life now." That night, Cassian carried Lily into her new room. She'd fallen asleep in the car on the way to the house, her arms around his neck, breathing soft and steady. He tucked her into bed beside her teddy bear and sat beside her for a while, just listening. The room was quiet, safe. He stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed by how much he had changed in just a few weeks. From boardrooms to bedtime stories, from strategy to sanctuary. He wasn't raising a company anymore. He was learning how to raise a child, and for the first time in his adult life, Cassian Rowe wasn't running from anything. He was exactly where he wanted to be. It was 9 months after Cassian first found Lily in that cardboard box when they stood together in family court hand in hand. Lily wore a light blue dress she had picked out herself, her curls brushed and pinned back with a ribbon. Cassian wore a simple navy suit, no tie, no designer flash, just a nervous but hopeful look in his eyes. The courtroom was small and filled only with those directly involved in the case. Meredith Langley sat behind them, papers in hand but a proud, warm expression on her face. The judge, an older man with tired but kind eyes, reviewed the documents carefully before looking up at Cassian. "Mr. Rowe, I see that all required evaluations have been completed. Background checks, home visits, psychological assessments, financial documentation, character references, parenting courses. You've gone above and beyond." "I wasn't trying to impress anyone," Cassian said honestly. "I was just trying to be her dad." The judge looked at Lily, who clutched Cassian's fingers and swung her legs gently from the chair. "Lily May," he said gently, "do you want Mr. Rowe to be your father?" She nodded quickly, then added, "He already is." That drew a small chuckle from the courtroom. The judge smiled. "Then I hereby declare the petition for adoption approved. Effective immediately, Lily May Rowe is the legal daughter of Mr. Cassian Elijah Rowe." Applause erupted. Not from a crowd, but from Meredith, the attorneys, and even the bailiff who had been quietly watching. Cassian lifted Lily into his arms as she beamed and threw her tiny arms around his neck. Outside the courthouse, Cassian felt lighter than he had in years. He let Lily choose where to go for lunch. She chose pancakes. They walked hand in hand down the sunny sidewalk toward a quiet cafe he'd rented out just for her. But just as they reached the door, a woman stepped out from the crowd. She was in her early 40s with tired eyes and worn clothes. She held something tightly in both hands, a faded photograph and a small stuffed giraffe, nearly identical to the one Lily had clutched the night she arrived at the hospital. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Her name isn't Lily. Cassian immediately stiffened. He stepped in front of Lily protectively. She's mine, the woman said quietly. Her real name is Madeline Grace Halston. She disappeared 3 years ago, and I've been looking for her ever since. Lily peeked out from behind Cassian, confused and silent. Her eyes flicked between the woman and the giraffe in her hand. The woman slowly knelt and held out the photo. In it, a much younger version of her sat on a couch, holding a baby with the same green eyes and the same birthmark under her chin. I swear to you, the woman said, tears rolling down her cheeks, I'm her mother. Cassian's stomach sank. The weight of 1,000 emotions hitting him all at once. Fear, disbelief, anger, protectiveness, and heartbreak. He looked down at Lily. She looked up at him. Is she telling the truth? Lily asked softly. I don't know yet, he whispered, stunned. Meredith, who had quietly followed behind, gently stepped forward. She took the photo and examined it. Her face paled. I'll need to run a DNA test, she said, immediately. No one spoke for a long time. The woman didn't push or demand. She just stared at Lily, her eyes full of restrained desperation. Cassian wrapped his arm around the girl's shoulders. We'll figure this out, he said gently. Together. That night, Lily didn't say much. She just sat in bed with the giraffe in her lap and the photo next to her pillow. Before falling asleep, she asked him one question. Even if I'm Madeline, will you still be my daddy? Cassian's heart broke. He kissed her forehead and whispered, always. The DNA results came back 3 days later, and they left no room for doubt. Madeline Grace Halston was indeed Madeline's biological mother. The moment Meredith handed Cassian the sealed envelope and confirmed the match, his chest tightened with something he couldn't immediately name. Grief, relief, fear, love, all colliding at once. Grace, the woman who had waited so patiently, didn't try to reclaim Madeline through lawyers or threats. She didn't even show up at Cassian's house until Meredith personally invited her. When she arrived, she wore the same simple jeans and windbreaker, her hands trembling as she held a small backpack filled with a few of Madeline's old baby clothes, a music box, and a photo album that had been kept like sacred scripture. I'm not here to take her away, she said softly as they sat across from each other in Cassian's living room. I just want to know her, if she'll let me. Cassian watched her closely. She looked nothing like the nightmares Lily used to whisper about. No malice, no agenda, just heartbreak, just longing. I don't know what the right thing is, he admitted, but I know one thing. I won't let her be hurt again. Not by anyone, not even by the truth. When Madeline was told, she didn't cry. She didn't run. She just sat quietly on the porch swing Cassian had built for her, staring out at the garden. So she's real? She asked. Cassian sat beside her. She is. And she didn't leave me? No, he said gently. She's been looking for you every day. Madeline, hugged her knees. Does that mean I have to leave you? He shook his head. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. She turned to him slowly, searching his face with those big green eyes. Can I have 2 families? The answer came out in a breath. Yes, you absolutely can. From that day forward, Grace visited often, but never alone. Cassian was always there, sometimes on the porch, sometimes in the kitchen, always within reach. Slowly, Madeline began to ask questions. She asked why Grace smelled like lemon soap, why her lullabies sounded familiar, why the giraffe still made her feel safe. One Sunday afternoon, Madeline asked if Grace wanted to come watch her ride her bike. They went to a quiet park. Cassian helped her strap on her helmet, and Grace held the back of the seat while she wobbled and pedaled. When Madeline finally let go and soared on her own, both of them were there, cheering, clapping, eyes shining. She crashed a few feet later, laughing breathlessly. Cassian rushed forward and lifted her into his arms, spinning her gently. I did it, she shouted. You did, he said, holding her close. As the sun set behind them, Grace stood beside Cassian. Her voice was quiet, but full of peace. "You saved her." Cassian shook his head. "Number, she saved me." Madeline looked up at the two of them, then reached out with both hands, one for each. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a lost little girl. She felt whole, loved, home. In my view, the ending of this story reflects something far deeper than just a happy resolution. It's about the healing of three people, each broken in their own way, who found redemption not through perfection, but through presence, vulnerability, and love that chose to stay even when everything got complicated. Cassian, the young billionaire, began the story thinking he had everything, only to realize that true wealth isn't measured in net worth, but in the quiet moments, like holding a child's hand, staying up through her nightmares, or choosing to let her meet the woman who gave her life. His greatest transformation wasn't in saving a child, but in allowing himself to become her father. Madeline, formerly Lily, shows us that resilience isn't just surviving trauma, but being brave enough to accept love again, to trust people after betrayal, and to open herself to having both a biological mother and an adoptive father. She didn't have to choose between them, and that choice itself is a healing act. And Grace, her mother, teaches us that real love is never selfish. She didn't storm in demanding to reclaim what was lost. She showed up humbly, carrying a backpack of memories and a heart full of forgiveness, trusting that her daughter's healing came before her own need to be right. This ending is beautiful because it's not perfect. It's real. It's layered with complexity, pain, joy, and growth. And perhaps most powerful of all, it reminds us that sometimes the family we build is no less sacred than the one we're born into.